Liberal multiculturalism says have your own beliefs and have your own values. So then when you have a whole group of different people that have different values and different beliefs, that means there's going to be conflict. Because how can you reconcile a religion that says it's okay to marry children with a religion that says that it's not? And like Islam Arabizes culture as it takes it over, Christianity doesn't Judaize culture. Christians believe that every culture can be redeemed. For an Englishman to be truly Christian, they must be the best of England. Because Christian virtues cultivates that which is most noble in the people. So in terms of resisting cultural Marxism, in terms of resisting liberal humanists, in terms of resisting Islamic radicals, what we have to be motivated by is not a hatred of these groups, but a love and an inspiration of what is better. And 1400 years of church history gives a testimony that no bishop can contradict, that no politician can contradict, that no philosopher can contradict. The 1400 years of our experience of Christians is that Islam will not tolerate us.
Hello, we are very privileged to be here at the moment with Bob the Builder, as he's often called, a famous speaker at Speaker's Corner in London, which is one of the bastions of free speech here in Britain, and that's a value that's very much a threat today as people are punished and put in prison for criticising certain political views, particularly opinions on Islam. Christianity is our traditional Christian religion, something the Queen is meant to respect, and we're very privileged here to speak with Bob. I wanted to ask Bob, what do you think has caused the decline in interest in Christianity in recent years?
The decline and lack of interest in Christianity in recent years, it's multifaceted. It's not a one thing. There isn't one silver bullet that did it. It's a process that started 300 years ago with the birth of the Enlightenment, and the process by which the church was separated from the state. And as the church was separated from the state, another guiding ideology had to be fashioned. And some of these wounds are self-inflicted, you know, in terms of the Reformation and the Civil War that Christians fought. It started to create a need to have another system of ordering society that was not connected to the Christian faith. And then, you know, this is a process that we know as secularization.
Yes.
And in terms of this process, it's a grand historical process, and it is not just political, but it's also cultural as well as certain kind of battles that were fought over things like evolution, and the sort of Civil War and the Reformation, the discovery of evolution and the way that some Christians reacted to it, the development of the development of the principles of the Enlightenment in terms of humanism and restructuring society along the lines of humanism, meant that the Christian faith and the church became less and less relevant to people's lives. And then this process, as I say, started 300 years ago, but it bore fruit in popular culture around the 1960s, when many of the old moral systems, which had become basically a hollow shell, people gave them lip service without truly believing or practicing them, was basically tore down as a new worldview and a new moral system was birthed in the 1960s. We call it the hippie movement.
In politics, often postmodernism.
Yeah, and this is now part of state education.
Yes.
It is something that we are suffused by, infused by. We're completely saturated by it. Every time you turn on your TV, every time you read a newspaper, every time a program that you watch, every song that you listen to, it is fully absorbed in the culture that we're in, and so we're inculcated into this system of values and beliefs that are very anti-Christian, that jar against Christianity. And Christianity and the church has been cowed to the point that it is an emasculated faith that many of the bishops have turned simply into a ritual that we do on a Sunday, rather than a core identity with a system of beliefs and values that we rally to and rally behind. And so because of this emasculated faith on one side that has been reduced simply to a Sunday ritual, and this militant humanism on the other, many people dismiss Christianity out of hand because they think they know what it is, and they're dismissing this sort of soft, emasculated ritualism of the institutional churches such as the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, when really Christian identity is something that is fundamental, that is rooted in our history, that was at times masculine confrontational, so that it would stand up for and stand up against its beliefs. So, for example, when the French Revolution, which is the first expression of political enlightenment philosophy, took place, the Vendée rose up against it. There was a peasant rebellion that was rooted in the Christian faith. You know, so it's a historical process that we've been enculturated into, that most people now reject an emasculated ritualism of the institutional churches rather than rejecting real Christianity.
So I want to ask you a question there, because I grew up in a very Christian background. I'm very drawn to Christian principles. I think they're fundamental to Western civilization.
Yeah.
And going to what you said about 300 years, the Enlightenment, there's also the Frankfurt School about 100 years ago, when they noticed communism had been established in the East, in Russia and Ukraine. They'd failed Anglo-Saxon nations like England and America, because we had certain institutions where we believed in our rights as individuals. And so they set out, they put it clearly in a document, anyone can check this, that they wish to destroy family, faith, and flags. So two of those things would be very important to you. But what I've always wondered about is looking at what they've done to tear down Christian civilization. You talk about masculinity there, but then that's what I feel we really need more masculinity, to stand up and fight for these values, even perhaps in the spirit of the Templars. But then we have the principle there, and Jesus said, to turn the other cheek. So how does this work? Because I would stand up there and fight for our Western values. On the other hand, people are saying, oh, the Christian thing is to be tolerant, the Christian thing is to welcome other cultures, the Christian thing is to be forgiving. And I don't want to turn the cheek to the destruction of our nation.
Yeah. So in terms of you mentioned cultural Marxism, and certainly the idea of the USSR that didn't want to risk an open conflation with the West and the sort of nuclear holocaust that proposed. They went into a project called cultural Marxism, which was to imbue and transform the culture of the West so that it was more malleable and open to the communist Marxist ideals. And the way that they did that was to try to tear down institutions that binded society in such a way that it could resist communism, could resist Marxism. And so the cultural Marxist project was born. So that would be things like disconnecting people from the church, tearing down the traditional family, creating divisions between different racial groups. And so it's about the politics of identity. And so the cultural project aligned well with the sort of liberal humanist agenda. Because before cultural Marxism was trying to tear down the traditional institutions to make people malleable towards Marxism, the liberal humanists of the Enlightenment, the Enlightenment militia, were trying to hijack certain Christian principles to dress up their own values and their own ideology as being Christian. And the reason they wanted to do that was for the same reason as the cultural Marxists. But the thing is, they did it in the 1700s and the 1800s, long before Marxism. And so, as Christians, they'll say things like, turn the other cheek. That means that you Christians, you should be pacifist. And the reason why they wanted Christians to be pacifist is because a church that has given up on the idea that it can defend itself is a church that can be dominated. So they wanted to teach Christians that we have to be pacifist, even though our own faith has not taught that. Turning the other cheek, as Christ was talking about, is not talking about pacifism. It is talking about the condition of the heart. If you look at what comes before the verse and after the verse, Christ is talking about the inner orientation of the inner man, which is towards love, forgiveness, a generosity of spirit, a humility before God, a peacefulness, and a state of mind that is imminent and present to the reality that you're in. He's talking about the inner man. So turning the other cheek wasn't a call to be pacifist, because the same Christ that taught turning the other cheek went into the temple, fashioned a cord of whips, and then used those whips to drive out the Jews. Now those Jewish money changers had been in that temple since it had been rebuilt. They believed that they had the right to be there, and they did not believe in turning the other cheek. So in a first century Jew, if you struck them on the left cheek, they'd strike you. So the gospel is talking about that what happened there was a fight between the Christ and the moneylenders. But Christ drove out both the moneylenders and the animals and turned over the tables. No one could describe such an action as pacifist. And if you read Revelations, that is not the image of a pacifist God. So we have to interpret the scripture with the whole of scripture. And when you do that, you can't come to the conclusion that turning the other cheek is about pacifism. What it is, though, is not about seeking revenge. It's not about being motivated out of hatred. So in terms of resisting cultural Marxism, in terms of resisting liberal humanists, in terms of resisting Islamic radicals, what we have to be motivated by is not a hatred of these groups, but a love and an inspiration of what is better. And that is our Judeo-Christian heritage and the true God Yahweh. And a love for him and a love for our brothers and sisters in the faith. Does that answer your question?
No, that answered my question very well, because we often hear this from the liberal left, and supposedly we can't challenge these ideas.
Yeah.
But many of these people coming in do threaten our Christian heritage. So we have people coming in who practice totally different religions to us. A Central Religious book is based on a prophet who raped children. So there are people promoting ideas that are not at all compatible with our country. And I'm starting to feel it's time that we stood up for these mission values. There's no Sharia law coming in. We've seen the Marxist project pretty much reach completion now. We have the full promotion of this degeneracy. It's on channel BBC 3. They're promoting basically sympathy for paedophiles. The content is absolutely shocking these days. And I really feel that if we are to move forward and stand for our values, many of us are, what people watch this channel, very right-wing. I think really we need to move forward, we need to start embracing Christianity. Now, many people might not yet be ready to go to church every day, they might not be that drawn to Christianity, but I think it would still be beneficial, would you not think, for them to start maybe considering a little bit of our Christian heritage.
Well, I mean, you've raised a number of points, and what's interesting is that cultural Marxism has lived on long after the USSR has died.
Yes.
And everywhere where communism has been tried, it has left a disaster in its wake. And you only have to look at any post-communist society to see how far those societies have been held back by communism. But the cultural Marxism was seeking to engender hatred against the West. And lots of people, that narrative still comes on. That narrative still lives in the liberal progressives. We talk about liberal guilt, the idea of hating our own culture, of hating our own identity, and these liberal Marxists, these liberal progressives, who are influenced by this narrative that was spawned by cultural Marxists, even though the cultural Marxists have disappeared, and their narrative continues that we must hate the West, feel bad about the West, let's change the West is evil. And the reality is that they're ultimately self-defeating, and they also have an ideology that is united in hatred against the West, which is why you find liberal progressives uniting with Islamists and defending those who seek to proselytize a series of values and beliefs that are in direct contradiction to Western Christian values. Now, I would say that lots of people would say that they are cultural Christians. Oh yes, I believe in the values of Christianity. But the truth be told, I've not yet met a cultural Christian that really understands what Christian values are. And when you test them and when you challenge them and you examine what they think Christian values are, what they are is really just English values with the word Christian written over the top. Because Christian values, for instance, just to give one example, is not rooted in any form of nationalism. Christianity is a truly internationalist movement. And true Christian values is not rooted in the success of any nation state. Christianity, the true Christian, is one who is committed to the triumph of the church. So, for those that say we must defend Christian values, I would say to you, do you know what Christian values are? I would challenge you that if you're going to defend Christian values, you owe it to yourself to know what you're going to defend. Because what you're going to defend is not English pub culture. What you're going to defend is not English nationalism or English patriotism. What you're going to defend is not something connected to a history that goes back to World War I and no further. You're going to end up defending something, an international movement that celebrates an Armenian saint. That's St. George, by the way. Yeah? That celebrates an Armenian saint and unites us to the Armenian people in a common cause of defending the church. Because the church was here before the British state, and the church will be here after the British state. So I would say to you, yes, people should embrace their Christian heritage, but let's embrace what really is Christian, not something that we dress up as Christian just to give it a label, when really what we're adopting is a liberal nationalism. Because if you're trying to defend liberal nationalism, you're not defending Christianity. Christianity and liberal nationalism are two different things. And what I would invite you to do is to change camp, to follow Christ. And that means you follow Christ wherever it leads you.
Do you think it's possible, this is a debate some people have, is it possible for someone to be both a Christian and a nationalist, or does that conflict with the sort of international nature of Christianity where it looks beyond the borders?
Yeah, well, the thing is, every people that is rooted in the church bring into the church the beauty of their own culture. You know, Christianity, say by contrast to Islam, is not about Judaizing every culture, you know. Like Islam Arabizes culture as it takes it over, Christianity doesn't Judaize culture. Christians believe that every culture can be redeemed. So then for the Nigerian to be truly Christian, they also must be the best of Nigeria. For an Englishman to be truly Christian, they must be the best of England. Because Christian virtues cultivates that which is most noble in the people. So there is a kind of nationalism that is allowed within the Christian faith, but it can't be exclusory. Christians must not reject Christians from other cultures or ethnicities because they're different. Christians practice a form of multiculturalism that works, because we've been practicing multiculturalism for 2,000 years, and what makes it work is that Christians are united by common beliefs and common values. Liberal multiculturalism, by contrast, is an utter failure. Because liberal multiculturalism says have your own beliefs and have your own values. So then when you have a whole group of different people that have different values and different beliefs, that means there's going to be conflict. Because how can you reconcile a religion that says it's okay to marry children with a religion that says that it's not? How can you say that we can marry our cousins with a religion that says that you can't? How can you say that how can you say that a culture that says female genital mutilation is okay with a culture that says it isn't? You can't have both. You can't celebrate both. One has got to give way to the other. And what we are living in the West is a fantasy that conflicting truths, claims, and conflicting values can live in harmony. And the rhetoric of the liberal state is that, oh no, that conflict is just mythical. All religions teach the same, and all religions believe the same. But that is actually a political mantra that's designed to refashion all religions and all truth claims to suit the liberal agenda, rather than being faithful to what those religions actually teach. Because I tell you, Christianity is not liberalism. Islam is not liberalism. Liberal progressives want Christianity to become liberal, and they want Islam to become liberal. Because if they do, then we'll all get along. But as a Christian, we can't abandon the Christian faith for liberalism. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, yes.
So I think as a Christian people, we have to separate ourselves from liberal society and the liberal agenda.
Okay, so you talk of some people often try to equate Christianity, Buddhism and Islam and just say they're all just religions.
Yeah.
They're all forces of good. And
yes.
Try to make them all simple. Now, in my analysis of Christianity, I'm not an expert in Islam, I did study a bit in Greece, but when I look at the Bible, it gets more peaceful. So we have the early scriptures, it's Hebrew, there's Aramaic, and there are some shocking factors in there, like for example, swallowing people. But then we come to the second half, and there's Christian forgiveness. So I see a big difference there. Then when I look through the Quran, it progressively gets more and more violent. Do you think this ideology of Islam can ever really coexist at all with the Western world or Christianity?
Well, to answer that question, let's look at the Middle East.
Yes.
Country after country was conquered by the Islamic world. And are we still good? Yeah. Okay. So country after country was conquered by the Islamic world, and Christians in those countries were subject to a system of laws called dimitude.
Yes.
And that dimitude led to the constant persecution of the church and the erosion of the Christian faith as the weak members of the Christian community were chipped off. And over 1400 years that has led to the decimation of the Christian faith in those places. And not just the Christians, but other religions as well were not even tolerated. And many of them were wiped out completely. And so if we want to ask ourselves, can Islam sit side by side with liberal values? Well, we have to answer in the negative. And what the liberals are hoping for is that Islam will liberalise, like they want the Christians to liberalise. But the Muslims are saying, not all Muslims of course, but many Muslims are saying they don't want to liberalise, they don't want to adopt the civilization of the West, they want to be authentic to Islam. And 1400 years of church history gives a testimony that no bishop can contradict, that no politician can contradict, that no philosopher can contradict. The 1400 years of our experience of Christians is that Islam will not tolerate us. It will subjugate us and it will make us into second-class citizens. And that means as Christians, we cannot permit or back down to Sharia law or Islamization. That as Christians, we must stand up to these things. And we must stand up to those things that facilitate them. And the success of Islamization is because of the failure of liberalism. It is the failure of liberalism that is allowing Islamization. And the antidote both to Islamization and the failure of liberalism is a muscular, militant Christianity. And by militant, I'm using it in the teachings of the church militant, the church on earth that is seeking to advance the kingdom, that is seeking to push forward the agenda of the church triumphant.
I'm going to go back to a bit more to Marxism you mentioned. What do you make of feminism today?
Feminism was when it started out, it was a genuine cause of justice. You know, the idea that women couldn't vote, it needed to be corrected.
Except for that the Bible teaches the man is head of the family. So.
Let's not confuse two things.
Yes.
We're talking about the structuring of an ordered society.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that there were things about there was things about the traditional culture that were genuinely in need of correction.
Okay, yeah.
But what feminism has become is something that is harmful. And the reason why it is harmful is because it is no longer concerned about what is just. It has gone beyond natural justice, the kind of equality that men and women share based upon their dignity, both being made in the image of God, and is now about the blurring and the dilution of what are very natural boundaries between men and women, to the point that feminism has in a feminist culture, men have lost any role, any sense of their role in society, because they have been emasculated, and this is our fault. You know, we've brought this on ourselves. I think feminism started from a good place to correct certain injustices, but it has gone beyond correcting an injustice to now creating injustices that are not really there and railing against them. And also by actually seeking to do harm to what are naturally good boundaries and differences.
Talking of those differences, myself and other people in the UK party and the other parties are very uncomfortable with the idea that when there's gender fluidity is one thing, we're also very uncomfortable with the idea at the moment that basically when it comes to adoption, there's talk of two women, adopting children. We feel very much that a child needs a father and a mother as God made the family unit, and that's apparently intolerant, that's apparently bigoted, that's apparently offensive. What do you think of that?
So I think the whole point of where our society is now is where Nietzsche said it would arrive at. I don't know if you're aware of Nietzsche, but Nietzsche said that now that God is dead, humanity walks over the abyss. And that abyss is where up and down and left and right and wrong, they all melt into the air. And that was actually what Marx said as well. Everything is melting into the air. And the point of what Nietzsche was driving towards is that without God as an anchor, everything else starts to lose its meaning. You take away that first stitch and everything else becomes unstitched. Because if there is no authority outside of humanity, then humanity can define whatever it wants. So humanity, the Western liberal society, because it practices state agnosticism, which is basically a way of saying that we don't know what is true. Yeah, it has broken down the clear evidence of thousands of years of human evolution and human tradition and human custom, which is that the most ideal family unit in which children can be raised and should be raised is a mother and a father who are bound together in a commitment towards one another. Now, I'm not here to say, and I'm not going to say, that single parents can't raise children successfully, or that gay couples can't raise children successfully. And I am saying simply that the state should hold to the ideal that wherever possible, the family unit should be of a father and a mother and their children. Now, where that cannot be achieved, then the state has to take a step back from the ideal to something that is less perfect. Because one of the problems in our society, and this is where Christian thought could be really useful, and this is particularly a line of argument used often by C.S. Lewis, who is a modern church father, is that we mustn't run from one extreme to the other and say that something is black or white, and we must. To do one is to do not do A is to do X or Z. There's actually a whole gradation in between, and that in terms of the family, the ideal that we should uphold is mother and father bound together in marriage. But where that has broken down, that we should support approximations close thereto. Yeah? And encourage and lead people towards that ideal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know, because that's functional and it's pragmatic. Because in a broken society, you're not going to be able to fix every family. So what you've got to do is you've got to create a path that gets us back to where we need to be. And if that means accepting something that's less than perfect now as part of a journey to get back to something that is more ideal, then that's what we need to do.
Okay. I'll come back to it in a second, but firstly, before I concluded the final question, I just want to ask you, the Queen, when she was appointed, at coronation, in that process she was handed the Bible, she held it, and if I understand correctly, she kissed the Bible, and she made she was asked to repeat an oath, to say she repeated the oath, which was to protect Christian values. How well do you feel she has fulfilled that these days?
I think that there is a kind of romanticism that besets many people on the right wing of politics, particularly in the UK. This idea that somehow the Queen is going to dramatically step forward and defend the Christian faith.
Oh, I don't think she has.
No, she hasn't and she can't. The Queen is purely, according to the lawyers and the scholars of the British organic constitution, is purely there for ceremonial purposes. And her coronation is equally ceremonial. It is meaningless, actually, in terms of real power. She has no real power. She has soft influence at the very best. And that is only dependent on how predicated her government is willing to listen to her opinion. She has no power beyond that. And for Christians, and for anyone on the right who's looking to the state, or is looking to others to defend the Christian faith, you are living in a fantasy. It is the responsibility of yourselves to defend the Christian faith. It is your responsibility to take on the mantle of standing up for your culture and not looking for other people to come to your rescue. Because if you're constantly looking for someone else to come to your rescue, you're never ever going to see victory. You have to own the fight for yourself. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to take forward the struggle yourself.
Okay. As a penultimate question, I just want to quickly ask, is there any particular party, before so you want, any particular party you feel that is standing up for these values, these Christian values today?
Yeah. It would be the Christian People's Alliance.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. The Christian People's Alliance is, as a Christian, my first choice of vote. Because they most hold to those Christian values that I believe in. However, as I said, in terms of perfections,
yes,
there are things that are of more perfection than another.
Yeah.
So if I'm not able to vote for the Christian People's Alliance, I have voted for UKIP. And the reason why I voted for UKIP is because I saw time and time again members of UKIP talking about and standing up for persecuted Christians. And for me, that meant something.
Yeah.
Because I saw politicians in the mainstream talking about the persecuted church in a way that the Conservatives, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats never did. But as a Christian, if ever on a ballot paper I see Christian People's Alliance and UKIP, I'll vote Christian People's Alliance first. Yeah.
So just to sum up basically this interview, you talk about this path, and obviously we're not perfect, and I appreciate your being patient in that. Very much makes sense to me, even from a political perspective. When I think of Overton window and trying to slowly draw people over, sort of, if you have a brick and chuck a bucket of water over it, won't break the entry down, but if you look at the building, little raindrops break bricks down. So it's a very sensible path of patience. Now, you spoke of cultural Christianity, which I suppose in a sense maybe I am, but maybe I don't fully embrace Christianity 100%, but talking of your path forward, and people might not be perfect, I think there are many people on the right who may not be perfect Christians, but would be drawn to many of the ideas you promote. How would you say we can move forward and encourage people on the right to work with the Christian ideals you promote as a single statement?
Well, I would say you first have to own it. Christianity, as I said, is something radically different from what people think Christianity is.
Yeah.
It is an inner spirituality that experiences and knows the immanence of the divine, and that allows the love of God to flow out of us to our brothers and sisters first, and then to wider society. Now, that has been channeled by liberal society to just charity work.
Yes.
But I'm determined for the church to break out of that mould and to recognise that being Christian doesn't just mean being kind to those in need, which of course it is, and that's laudable and applaudable, but it also means standing up against that which is wrong. And any ideology that justifies things like slavery, that things like child marriage, that thing justifies the persecution of the church, we have to oppose, and it is right to do so. And in terms of how people on the right who might call themselves cultural Christians, I would say the first thing you need to do is get a Bible.
Oh, I have.
Right? Or if you can't get a Bible, get the Bible app on your smartphone, download it, and start to read the Bible. And when you read the Bible with the commentaries of the great fathers of the church, both the patristic fathers that came from the 1st century to the 7th century, the later fathers, including the Reformation fathers like John Calvin and Martin Luther and Zwingli, and also modern church fathers like C.S. Lewis and Tolstoy, and read the faith as the church has read the faith, read the Bible as the church reads the Bible, and root yourself in a system of values and beliefs that predate the United Kingdom, that predate the European Union, that predate liberalism, and that predate any sort of Western enculturation that you might have experienced. Root yourself in those values and those beliefs, because that will give you the full armour of God, as we say, to resist the acidic effects of cultural Marxism and liberal progressive thought, and it will also serve as a corrective to the worst extremes of right-wing thinking. And own it for yourself. Start to study the faith and begin to speak to God. I'm going to give you 7 disciplines. 7 disciplines that can help you as someone who is a cultural Christian to make your Christian faith more imminent, more real, and more practicable. These are 7, as it were, pegs that you can pin your Christian life by. They are tutors. Yeah? They aren't the point of the faith. The faith is not to practice them. You practice them so that your inner man is formed as a Christian. And these are to pray and have a regular rhythm of prayer. Now I would suggest to you should pray 3 times a day as a minimum. Okay? Morning, noon, night. Okay? The second discipline is to fast. Fast on a regular basis. Fast during Lent, fast during Advent, fast on Wednesdays, fast on Fridays. And fasting for the Christian means having 1 meal a day. Doesn't matter when you have it, you just have 1 meal a day. It's not going to kill you, but it is fasting. And if you think it's easy, try it. Okay? The third discipline is to give alms, to give to charity, in terms of your resources, in terms of your time. And don't think of charity just in terms of what the secular state says. Giving charity is things like freeing slaves. It is about helping missionaries. It is about supporting Christians who are fighting to defend their faith in one way or another. You know, so that you can. There's lots of ways you can give to charity. Don't just think it's about giving to things like cancer research, though of course that is laudable and not to be in any way dismissed. So give to charity. So we've got prayer, fasting, giving to charity. Study your faith, study your Bible with the commentaries, with the historical teaching of the church. Study your faith based on, and one good resource for that would be Bible Hub, H-U-B, Bible Hub, because you'll find all the commentaries there as well, and when you get stuck on a passage, they'll be able to help you realise what that passage is teaching. So study the faith, study the history of the church, study the kind of things that we're going through, okay? The 5th discipline to practice is evangelism, sharing your faith with others, being wise how you do it though. I would discourage anyone who thinks they're going to be the next Billy Graham. The chances are you're not. Don't become one of these lunatic preachers who stand on the road screaming at everybody. Just get a table with a sign saying explore the Christian faith. Buy books and have books donated to you by Christians. Talk with people one-to-one like I do with you, and then meet with them afterwards for coffee. Draw them into this masculine Christian faith that we need in this country, that isn't preached by the bishops. That's evangelism, or speak to your friends and to your family. So practice evangelism. And the thing about evangelism is it will expose to you how much you don't know. So it will expose to you every place that you're ignorant or every place you didn't understand something, and it will force you to study more. So it gets a good cycle going to evangelize. Okay? The 6th discipline. Yes, so we've got prayer, fasting, giving in alms, what did I say? The study of the faith, evangelism, solitude. The practice of solitude is to retreat from the world and from all distraction. Give yourself times in your life, whether monthly or weekly, where you separate yourself from all distraction and you look inward, you look into your inner man, your inner woman, and you assess yourself as to how you're measuring up to the virtues of the Christian faith. Where are you being patient? Where are you being loving? Where are you pursuing justice? Where are you giving in to envy or greed or anger or wrath or lust? Cultivate those things that make you into a better man, a better woman, one who defends his faith, defends his community, stands up for what is right, stands up against what is wrong. Okay? And finally, the 7th discipline is to live in community. Because a Christian life can't be lived alone. You have to live in community. Now, in modern society, that means just getting involved in your church and finding a good church. Not a limp-wristed, weak, liberalised church that doesn't have any sense of its own values or beliefs, but a church that has clung to the apostolic and prophetic teaching. So those are 7 disciplines that if you practice them, it will transform you and it will transform your life. That in itself isn't enough, it isn't everything, but it's you ask for the next step, it's a good start. And what that will do is that will propel you forward, and organically you'll fall into the next things that are necessary.
It's very informative, and I was thank you for the time to take and speak with us. I'm really actually very impressed by your knowledge of cultural Marxism. Explained that very well, and that greatly impressed me, and I think that's very informative for our viewers. I've actually never heard someone express that so well, and I hope maybe at some time in the future we can do another interview, because you're clearly very knowledgeable, And clearly the family, the faith and the flag are a serious threat to the Frankfurt School. So while maybe not everyone on the right is a perfect Christian, you spoke of that patience, that path forward, and I think it's very important we look at the right and how we can work with the church as we see the threat of Sharia law, we see this degeneracy, this hedonism from Marxism with the gender fluidity, the militant feminism, the militant LGBTQ, and I think it's very important that we look for the ways we can work together. So I'd like
Just before you go, I want to talk, because you're talking about working with the church. Your viewers need to understand something.
Yes.
The church in the West has been totally emasculated.
It has.
And it is led by bad leaders who are more concerned with being public servants or useful to the political class than they are defending or standing up for the Christian community. A real leader is someone who cares for the needs of his own community. And many of the bishops that we would call leaders of the church do not care for the Christian community. What they care for is being useful and accepted by liberal society. So you need to work with those Christians who have not abandoned the faith. And you won't be able to distinguish between those Christians who are for the faith and those Christians who are against the faith unless you yourself know the faith. So when you're encouraging your people on the right to work with the church, what I'm saying is they need to work with the right people in the church. Because there are wolves in sheep's clothing amongst the church, and Christ warned us that there would be such people. And you need to be able to spot the wolves in sheep's clothing. The current Pope is very questionable in that side. So finally, what I would say to you is work with the right kind of Christians. There are better Christians there. But also, I would say bring your muscle into the church and don't let the church turn you into wimps. If you guys want to know more about the kind of muscular faith that I believe in, not practiced by the bishops. Look on Soco films. As Christians, what I stand for is a rediscovery of a proud Christian tradition that wants to see as its guiding light is the mantra to see the church triumphant.
And if you enjoyed this video and want to watch more, please do subscribe and please do check out this impressive man's Twitter profile, please do. We'll put it in the description below.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.